Thank you so. Look at this candle. A Kundalini candle. Okay, so wish with me. All right. So what I would really like to explore in our time together, and it's a very short period of time, so I would encourage, whether you are finding yourself taking a walk around the lake, or you're in your room and maybe even taking a nap and resting, you find yourself walking over to the dining room. You find yourself maybe eating your food, and you like the food or you don't like the food, or whatever it is that is happening within this moment. I would encourage, to the best of your ability, just be fully present with that. I'm not speaking of some kind of a mental kind of mindfulness that all of a sudden, you know, you eat very slow, or, you know, you're walking. I mean, you can do that if you want to, if it helps you to connect to this moment. But I'm not speaking really of a practice. I'm speaking of more what is an aware, awake, open attention. That's really what I'm speaking of. You may find that in this aware, open attention that the mind is very chaotic, and it may be judgmental, it may be, you know, monkey mind, where it's, you know, jumping all over the place. Wonderful. There's this awake, aware attention. You may find that the mind is unusually judgmental. It's really trying to pick apart your next door, the person that's sitting next to you, and you know, they're sniffing, or you know, they're not being quiet in the way that you think they should be quiet, or then pay attention to that. And I'm not saying splitting off the mind and one part of the mind watching another part of the mind. What I'm really suggesting is to bring the attention back and let it settle into the body, and not outside looking in, but kind of a settling that happens within the center of the body. Just let it settle. Let it find its resting place. The attention is so habitualized to go outside of the body and to watch the mirror of consciousness that the mind, thought and image and then feeling projects. We are tremendously habitually, over thousands of years probably, we're habitualized to put the attention outside. And so it's that simple, just simply bringing it back, no matter what is happening. It will happen probably, you'll have to remind this coming home, coming back, maybe 100 times, 500 times, or more. But it's just that very simple reminding of oneself of actually what's true. Awareness, truth, wisdom, spirit, the natural state, whatever you want to call what we all are, knows itself. It recognizes itself. And that simple bringing it back unto itself then starts to brighten and clarify and wake up what you naturally are. It's really that simple. Because it's so simple, the mind wants something a little fancier, right? It'll try to create something a little more, wowie zowie. It will get, the mind will become bored. There's nothing in it for the mind. But that's an indicator that you're moving something that is, in a way, behind and below the mind. Something that is so much more open, so much more vast, so much more whole and complete than the mind could ever, ever, ever be. It includes the mind. It's not a negation of the mind. It's just opening the attention until it can be with the mind and its contents. But it also is open to everything else that is happening at the same time. I want to explore together also the full human spectrum. And it's not so much the full human spectrum that we are taught. We're taught the mental is the human experience, the emotional is the human experience. Maybe some of us have kind of a felt sense of the presence. Maybe some of us have a very deep sense that's much beyond the mind and the psychological contents. But the full spectrum of the human being is that is invisible, totally, unfathomably invisible to the senses. It can be felt. It is experienced. It recognizes itself. But it is beyond the mind. It is that sense of, and you can feel it in the room, it's starting to become a little bit more present, right? It's silent. It isn't grasping for this or trying to reach behind from some past experience or some concept. There's a stopping. If you think about the pendulum that swings, and if left alone, it just comes to the center. And there's a stillness, a stopping. A fully, I'm here. I'm here, right here. And because it recognizes itself, it naturally is drawn like a moth to the flame, to this sense of stopping, to this sense of stillness. But it cannot be known by the mind. It is impossible to be known by the mind. It's a felt sense, and at the same time, left alone, it will come to this place of stillness because it knows itself. And its whole movement is to come home. It's the whole movement of this incarnation. Is resolution for that has not been fully liberated in this life stream, and then to recognize itself in this life, in this body. It wants to come home. And so that very simple, just drawing it back, it will lead it's the attention back unto itself. You don't have to know about it. It doesn't have to look like anything that you've read or even experienced before. Because the stillness is infinite. The stillness, be still and know that I am God, right? It's one of the things in the Bible that actually we can resonate with. So the full spectrum of the human being is this invisible, and it's really not talked about in the human experience much. It's not talked about really even in a lot of spiritual circles. But I would encourage to just find out for yourself. It was one of the Buddha's main teachings. Find this out for yourself. And quite naturally, quite spontaneously, it isn't that you need to do something or know something or direct something. Quite spontaneous, out of the stillness, there's a natural movement. It's the dynamic aspect of stillness, and that is love. And again, love recognizes itself. It isn't something that you have to, kind of study and work at and be a good person and be a loving person or not a loving person. It has nothing to do with any of that. The love that is being spoken of here is a love that is without conditions. It isn't trying to not have conditions. It simply is before all conditions even take place. It's the air within this room and everything contained within this room. It is the atmosphere that we live and breathe and see and hear and speak. So the love naturally arises. It isn't directed, it isn't a willful movement, it just naturally is. And then out of the love there is this creation, this creative movement that comes from the stillness, and it gathers all that it is and it begins to create itself in all form. And we share, everyone within this room and all beings, trees, mountains, ocean, sky, earth. We share the same silent root, the still ground that everything arises from, without exception. Those we like, those we don't like. And it forms itself into Marty, tree, flower, ground, cloud, wind. That's the human spectrum. And then the form that we call human, person, male, female, it begins to be moved by this wisdom that is inherent in the still ground. And it begins to create itself by this love, which is the space, the vastness that everything is, contained, lives and dies, creates itself and dissolves and falls away continuously. The full human spectrum also contains that has not been resolved. They're like fragments of dreams, right? You can call them incarnation, you can call them my father's lineage, my mother's lineage, my cultural lineage. I mean, you can define them in any way that you want. But if you really look at them in just this sort of pure seeing, they're just fragments of dreams that have not fully been liberated. They've not fully been seen through. They've not fully been loved home. And so it appears that we have this kind of, my teacher calls it a karmic train. And it carries these unresolved fragments of a dream. And it isn't like a punishment. There's some of us, that have really great karma, and some of us that don't have great karma, and, too bad, good luck next time, It's not that kind of a viewpoint. It's actually, again, love itself that is wanting to free itself, to fully permeate itself, and therefore liberate itself, dissolve itself. It's a natural movement. And so when that fragment of a dream or a crystallized image held in time and space, how about that? Right? That's all it is. And so the full spectrum of the human being is inviting all to come home. It's over. All the non-resolution, all the fragments of the dream, it's over. It was over the moment it happened. But for whatever reason, there was a shock or a charge that created, a contraction, a tremendous amount of pain. And then there was like a freezing or a grasping around that, and encapsulating that experience. And then through time it became more and more solidified, more and more unconscious, right? But when you start to really look at it, its whole movement is to resolve itself, be permeated by itself, to come home, to lay down. That's its whole movement. So the whole life, rather than becoming a chore or an effort or trying to cover it up or compensate for it or, survive anyway, even though you've gone through hell in your life, childhood or whatever, it becomes a welcoming. It becomes a welcoming of what is presenting itself. Life becomes an offering rather than a chore that you just sort of have to get through. Or if, everyone else is so screwed up, I can't believe it, and so you're just doing your best to get through this, kind of insane life. Whatever you're telling yourself. I ran into so many spiritual personalities, and they just say, I have got to get it this time because I need to get out of here. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I run into. This is the last round for me. So they want to become awake or enlightened, so they can separate themselves out of what is actually impossible to ever separate yourself from. I don't know who I was talking to today, just saying, that, yeah, it was you, that you become, there's a certain kind of recognition, a mature recognition, and you go, oh, great, come back, wonderful, don't come back, great, it doesn't matter. That's really the true bodhisattva vow. When you're free to come back to the earth and dance whatever dance is moving through you. You're free. It's a delight. Yeah, yeah. Or maybe, who knows, be a cloud. I don't know. It doesn't matter. That's the freedom that I'm pointing to. That's the freedom of being this full spectrum of the human being. The human life is so tiny. It's just this little tiny speck. But it's the dance that's happening right now. This is the dance that's happening. And if you don't fully enter this, then you're going to get another opportunity, probably. God is good and God is generous and God is infinite, right? And I mean God in this holy intelligence that permeates everything. So then you take maybe a different form. That perhaps rather than a punishment, it's more conducive for you to recognize this freedom, for you to recognize this continuum. Because all life is set up to support this recognition. All of life is set up for this. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to keep pushing it away. Unfathomable amount of energy to keep pushing it away. It's such a relief to just stop, open, say yes, and welcome the full spectrum of the human experience. No reservation, no resistance, no need. No need. That's all over. Where we learned resistance, where we learned to, these sort of discernments. This is good, this is not good, this is, these prayers, all of that was very important at a certain point. When we were too young, when we really needed that. But it's long past. Everyone within this room, it's long, long, long past. It's very, very challenging to speak of this, because if you begin to talk and describe, you've already separated yourself out of it, right? And the best you can do is to point in a way that it interests or inspires, or it creates a curiosity. You become curious or interested. And I don't care how brilliantly awake you are, and how long ago you became awake. In this moment, that's absolutely, totally, it's just immaterial. It's totally immaterial. Because in this moment, it's totally new and fresh. And it's offering itself to let go, to say yes where perhaps you couldn't, to lay down resistance, rebellion, needing to run it through the mental computer, whatever it is that the tendency is. It's an opportunity to set that down. I don't care if this is what you've been doing for 50 years. It's immaterial. This moment has never been and will never be again. It's an opportunity. It's an offering. It's a grace. It's love coming back for itself, offering itself over and over and over again. And we play these games together of maybe bringing attention to something that has been so locked, so unconscious, so wounded, that it's been layered and covered over. Wonderful. It's not identifying as the story. It's not being indulgent in the story. It's just simply bringing the loving awareness to it. And then on its own, it begins to unfold and reveal itself. It's just bringing the bright, open awareness to something that has been unconscious. And on its own, it begins to unfold. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't sort of talk about it, or perhaps, you spend a period of time maybe talking to a wise counselor, or, you have a conversation maybe with a guide or a teacher that has already walked through this. But that's God showing up as this wise counselor, or this guide or teacher or book or conversation with your friend. It was the bringing of awareness to it that then it draws to itself the most conducive and unique way, perfectly designed for you. Maybe it's a journey, maybe it's a ceremony. It doesn't matter. You don't look for the way. You just bring the loving attention and awareness to it. And the rest unfolds on its own. Bless your heart, Arvin. He just been on a plane for 24 hours from India. I can see him just like, oh. So we'll wind this up pretty soon. So this time that we have together it's an opportunity to not have to pick up our phone, not be diverted by other people and what they would like us to do or don't want us to do. We don't have to deal with kids, we don't have to deal with jobs, we don't have to deal with anything. That is such a rare gift, especially within our culture. It's an extraordinarily rare gift that we've given ourselves. And so that's why I encourage to use every moment of it. Not in some rigid kind of fancy thing that you've read about somewhere, but just simply open attention. Open attention. No matter what is arising. And it's fusing, in a way, the attention to the living moment. It's fusing the attention to actually what is right here. Because this is it. This is it. Be here now. It was the truth. It may have taken most of us 40 or 50 years to figure that out, but it's the truth. That's all there is. If you've ever had a very deep glimpse, you can see there is no future, there is no past, there is not when you get there. None of that exists. None of it. It's right here. And rather than being a punishment and a boring thing for the mind to have to deal with, it's really, at least that's been my experience, it's really quite the opposite. It's so palpable and alive and present. There's a curiosity, there's an interest and an engagement. Love naturally pours out, and it wants to know itself through this beautiful configuration called Michael. That's its movement. It really has no other agenda. That's the reality, at least that's what has been discovered here. It's anything but boring. And the more that just simply is freed up, the more it just unfolds. The deeper that richness, the more it is, this richness. It isn't an accomplishment. We've all been told that. It isn't that you land somewhere or arrive somewhere. you haven't screwed up if you haven't quite opened to this moment in the fullness that it is. There's nothing to do with that. Your timing is actually quite perfect. So it's a settling, a kind of a resting, a kind of a coming back into itself, rather than this kind of a reaching or a grabbing of our last glimpse, you know, that was so far out. Has nothing to do with any past glimpse. Nothing to do with that. I don't so much anymore, but I used to have these wowie, zowie experiences. I mean, great states. You know, I was a great state dreamer, you know, just really wonderful. And so when my life would be very challenging, instead of like bring my attention to actually what's trying to reveal itself, what's trying to free itself, I'd reach back and I'd think about, you know, that wowie zowie, you know, experience. And I'd long for that. It took a long time to figure it out, that it no longer exists. It didn't happen, even. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? Phew, gone. It doesn't diminish it. It isn't like now all of a sudden you get into pushing away these very beautiful experiences, these very beautiful glimpses of itself. I'm not saying that at all. Enjoy. Say yes. They're great. But that isn't it. So you don't in any way reach back or lean forward. Compare, qualify. You come back. You come back to yourself. You come back to yourself. So meditation allows that opportunity. And instead of like, oh my God, my back aches, I am bored, I wish I was anywhere else, I can't believe I signed up for this, you know, can't we do something else? I know I'd feel better if I had a different chair, or I don't know, I don't like this room, or you know, whatever. It's just keep coming back, opening, and letting go. Keep bringing the attention back, settling, and letting go. Mind will talk, body may be uncomfortable, restlessness perhaps will arise, strong emotions may come up, resistance, you'd like to run out of the room. Just attention back, settle, and let go. 99.9% of you will not pay any attention to what I just said. That's okay. But eventually you'll find that it's actually that simple. You know, Ajahn wrote this beautiful discourse on true meditation, and that's basically what he's saying. The only way you can be with whatever is arising is just come back, be here, and let it go. And then everything will unfold and reveal exactly what is most perfect for you in the most perfect way. And the liberation is complete in that way. It resolves, it dissolves. And there's no one in there that then wants to grab and identify and want or don't want. Do you get a sense of what I'm trying to say? For you master meditators, is there anything really more than that? I mean, we have a mantra, or we do our breath, or we do all sorts of techniques, but when you really get down to what true meditation is, it's coming home. It's bringing the attention and fusing it back into the primordial ground. It was never separated. It was just a habit of mind. So if you approach, and there's really, quite a few meditation times that are scheduled, just approach it in a new and fresh way and see for yourself. And then meditation becomes something that you renew. You're informed. You're immersed into the dark light, the dark ground. And everything is there. There's nothing that does not begin and is held in this ground. And so it starts to permeate when you just simply fall back into it. It starts to permeate every cell. It starts to wake up, nourish, reveal, inform. So meditation ceases to be like a discipline. I mean, discipline is the taxi maybe that gets you there. But it becomes a love. It becomes a union, a conscious union. It's coming back unto itself. It becomes very different than what most of us were taught and practiced. So the full spectrum of the human being. Nothing is left out. Nothing is left out. That is invisible, that becomes visible, that lives itself, and that dies back unto itself. All one thing. There's that constantly changes, and that there is that is the constancy, that never changes. One rests and abides in that does not change, and expresses and enters fully in that changes continuously. I know that sounds like gobbledygook, but you'll find that for yourself. All experiences are welcome here. So you may be sitting over there and this pocket of anger like rises up, and you're seeing red, and you're blaming the teacher, and you're blaming the room, and you're blaming your neighbor, and you're blaming the Catholic Church, and the whole works. But what if you just saw that this explosion of anger that has been freed up with this open, settled, welcoming ground, that it's a grace? It isn't something that you identify and blame. It's just something that's being freed up, that actually has driven your life, maybe since infancy. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? What if deep sorrow arises? Is it you that are having this sorrow and grief, or is it sorrow arising? It's being liberated, it's being freed. So I encourage to, can you let this happen without the collapsing of identification? Because if you can just let it free up, it actually has kind of almost a underlying ecstatic kind of a quality. Do you know what I'm talking about? The identity is where the contraction happens, and then the suffering happens. So you can experience these deep, deep, deep seated, quite repressed, powerful emotional appearances, and feel like a jubilation as it's freeing itself up, along maybe with weeping. It all can be held and contained in this. It isn't negating it, but it isn't collapsing into the identification. That's where the liberation can actually happen. So I'm just bringing these up because in retreats, usually all of this happens, right? Beautiful states, beautiful insights, resistance, strong emotions, strong concepts that you're trying to grab and hang on to, and then project. All of that will happen. But in this settled, open stillness, lovingly seeing itself, it has room to happen. And yet there's nothing that grasps and identifies. No location, no position, no identity. That's the reality of it. If you have a particular lineage that you love and you're quite identified with, by all means, it's yours. This is beyond and above and includes any tradition, any identification. It doesn't matter. You don't have to defend it here. Anything. It's yours. If you have no tradition especially, you have no really identification, great. That's yours too. I remember when I first started to teach, we were talking about that at dinner, and I was just kind of shocked at the defense and the resistance and the arguments and the pushing back, and I thought, well, why are you here? It took me a while to just have the compassion to recognize that it was just the mind, trying to hold on. But I couldn't figure it out. I thought, well, I thought you signed up because you wanted to know your nature. But then compassion started to see what was actually happening. Or I'd see right before someone was just kind of like blow open. And it would be like you'd be on this bank of a river, and you're trying to backpedal, and all the dirt's flying around, and you're falling, and it was like, what's going on? Just anything but just to fall, right? Anything. And then I started to see, that again, it was just this gasp of contraction that was happening. It was held within the mind. Some usually very old fear. It was all dressed up into some kind of a spiritual concept. And then the recognition for that to happen before it was time was not compassionate. It didn't work out. It had to have its own timing. So then I relaxed too, because I used to try to, force it or save it or, do something. And of course I couldn't. The more I did, the more the resistance was. It was a funny dance for a while. But sense that. Sense actually what's happening. You don't have to do anything about it. You don't have to change it. Just sense it. So I see several people nodding out, so I'm going to give you a break. Everything is offering itself unto you to fully come home. No wave is ever against you. Just let that permeate. What would it be like to live like that? You don't have to will it, you don't have to fight it, you don't have to compensate, you don't have to repress it, you don't have to be anything but what you are. What would that be like? So if we could just kind of explore that in our time together, your life would totally change. Your life would totally change. All life is offering itself unto you. It's supporting this that is remembering itself. And then living from this remembrance. So let's sit for about 20 minutes. 9:20. And then we can just go to bed, sleep, take care of yourself. I want to encourage that all the time that we're together. If you need to take a nap, take a nap. But also notice if you're checking out or you just genuinely need to take a nap. So take care of yourself and listen what really needs to happen here. I really encourage that. And the listening can't happen here. The listening happens here. All right? It's very simple.